All right, so welcome to our class today. And in our class today in project management, we are going to start a new topic where we'll be looking at time management and network analysis. So in our previous classes, we have already introduced and explained and also defined what a project is, and then what is planning and how you can be able to plan. Then we also looked at what is known as a work breakdown structure, which I believe is a prerequisite for us to get to understand the network analysis and also project time management. So project time management, as we had already discussed in our previous classes, from here and there, of course, by now we should be able to understand just how critical and important time is when it comes to running or implementing of a project. This is because if you mismanage time, okay, you end up wasting resources, and you might end up jeopardizing the project itself. Therefore, time is something that should be taken very seriously as we are implementing a project and as we want to manage a project successfully. All right. So under the project time management process, we particularly have two stages or two groups. As you can see on our screen here, we have got a diagram that is just a summary of the whole entire process and how the entire process develops or unfolds. So if you allow me to illustrate, if you can see in the first column here, okay, in the first column, we have what is known as a process group, simply showing us the two groups or categories or stages that are involved under project time management process. So the first category or group is planning. Okay, so the first group is planning. Then the second group is monitoring and controlling. All right, so for us to be able to manage time properly, the first step or the first thing that we have to do is we need to have a plan in place. And of course, we talked about things like maybe let's say the SWOT analysis, which is a smart way of getting to just analyze the environment. Okay, you analyze the environment in which you want to start implementing your given project. So you see the strengths, the weaknesses, and so on and so forth. And then from there, it will give you insights on how you can be able to come about with a proper plan that will be efficient and effective. So in the process of managing time, the first step is simply planning. And then once we are done with the planning, then the next thing is you have to now start taking decisive actions to ensure that you are able to monitor and also control the implementation of the given project. So under planning here, we have got about 5 integrated management processes. Okay, let me just wrap this. All right. So the first one here is known as the defining of activities. So under activity defining, which is complementary or illustrating our last topic in our previous class, here we get to come up with the group or the list of all the activities. Okay, you have to start jotting down the activities that will be required for you to implement your given project. So the project, of course, we looked at different categories of project, and the project can be anything. Maybe if it is a project to do with construction, maybe let's say you are building a swimming pool. Okay, so you begin to list down the activities that are involved in construction of that swimming pool. So there will be digging involved, there will be people that needs to connect the pipes. I don't know if we can call them plumbers. Then you also have a need of people that need to do plastering, painting, water engineers, and so on and so forth. So you begin to list down all those activities, and then once you are done, you must be able to compile them up. Okay, compile them up and then come up with what is known as an activity list. So each integration management process here has got a major output, and under the first one here of defining activities, the major output is to come up with an activity list. Then secondly, we have to do what is known as a sequencing of activities. So under sequencing of activities, of course, all these processes here have just been summarized, but as we begin to go along the way, we'll begin to discuss them into details. So don't worry, in case you don't really get the gist of what we're talking about, I'm sure as you keep following and as we keep going in our classes, you begin to understand more about these things. So under sequence activities, what we simply do now is we will get the activity list that we have come up with, okay? And then once we get this list, then we begin to now delegate, okay? Or begin to project or establish the relationships among these given activities. So you need to know, okay, so this bunch of activities that we have, which activity are we supposed to start with and which activity are we supposed to end with? Which activity is supposed to follow this one? Which activity will be dependent on which activity? Okay, by doing that, you begin to create what are known as logical dependencies or relationships, and together they begin to form sequences of activities. And then as you come up with this sequence of activities, you end up drafting what is known as a project schedule network diagram. As we go along the way, we shall look at the various network diagrams that are usually used or implemented under project management. All right. So once you are done with this second stage, then you go to the third stage, which simply is estimation of activity resources. Okay, so under estimation of activity resources here, you begin to find out just exactly how much resources will be required for each activity that you have listed in your activity list and sequenced in your sequence of activities. Okay, you need to know how much money will be required, how much tools will be required, and other various resources, including time. Okay, although okay, we'll come to that will come under the fourth stage. But yeah, so under estimation of activity resources, you simply just begin to come up with the resources that will be required for you to be able to carry out the various activities and also tasks that you have listed to be included or to be used or needed in the implementation of your given project. And then once you do that, then you are able to come up with a major output of an activity resource. So activity resource just simply shows now uh, an estimation of the resources that will be required. So now from here, you can be able to see, okay, so these are the resources that we need, and we probably won't need this. And then this is how much of each of these resources we'll be able to need for us to be able to implement this given project. And then once you are done with that, then you go to the fourth stage, okay, which is the estimation of activity duration. So just from the word duration here, you can already know that we are talking about time, okay. And then So now when it comes to estimation of activity duration here, you must be able to now start estimating the time it will take for each activity or task to be implemented or completed. So we might have maybe, let's say, the same project for construction of a pool. You might say, okay, so how much would it take for us to dig the ground? Of course, you have to maybe make some consultations with your experts, the engineers that will be involved in digging of that same pool, and they might be able to measure the requirements. Maybe they will say, okay, so this pool that you want to construct, it will be how long and how deep. You tell them, and then they'll give you some rough estimates of how much it will require or how long it will take for them to be able to dig that pool. So you will say, okay, so digging under activities, digging, then you say it will take this amount of time, maybe to take 3 days. Okay, and then once the digging is done, maybe the second thing that will follow, or the second activity, maybe will be plastering of the pool. I'm just guessing. I've never been involved in a project of digging a pool, so I'm assuming there's also plastering involved, since I know once you dig a pool you also have to put like the concrete, and you have to make sure like it's well plastered, and then you have to start adding tiles or something like that. Yeah, but I'm sure you get what I mean. So after you are done digging, you estimate, then you also list the other activities that will follow, such as plastering. Then you also indicate, okay, so under plastering, this is how long it will take. And you just continue so on and so forth until you estimate the duration for all the activities that you have listed in to be required for the implementation of your given project. And then once you are done, then you will be able to come up with an activity duration estimate. So this one will not only help you know how long it will take for each activity, but it will also help you estimate how long it will take for you to complete the entire given project. And then once you are done, then you must be able to go to the fourth stage, which is the development of a project schedule. So under development of a project schedule, this is where you are able to list the activities, you're able to list the resources, and then you are able to list the duration, okay, for each activity to be done in a given project. And once you are done with that, then you can be able to create a project schedule or schedules within the project. So schedule kind of run in tandem with the planning. When we talk about planning, what we are simply talking about is we want to know what resources are required, okay, and how much of these resources are required. When it comes to schedule, the schedule just simply wants to know when will these resources be required along the way of project implementation. Okay, so the schedule is derived from the plan. However, it begins to create, okay, durations, okay, or it begins to delegate durations or time that will be required for each activity or phase under the implementation of your given project. All right. So all of these activities or all these stages will fall under planning and will complete the first group of the project time management process. And then once this is done, then you can be able to go ahead and do the implementation of your given project. If you remember, all of this again is also falling in line with a project life cycle. By this time, we believe we have already moved from the first stage of the project life cycle, which is initiation. the second stage, which is planning, and then the third stage, which is the implementation. Okay, so once you are done with planning, then you go to the third stage, which is implementation. And once the implementation has begun and has processed, then you can go to the fourth stage under the project life cycle, which is the second stage under project time management process, known as monitoring and controlling. So under monitoring and controlling, here you just begin to measure the activities or the progress of activities. Okay, how are these activities progressing? Are they progressing according to what was written in the plan? Okay, then from there you will be able to know whether they are going according to plan or they are not going according to plan. If they are not going according to plan, of course you must be able to come up with alternative actions, okay, or adjustments to ensure that the activities are readjusted so that they begin to go according to the way they were planned to go or to move. That way, we were doing what is simply known as controlling of activities or control schedule. All right, so that wraps up the time management process of a project, and this is just a rough summary of exactly what we are going to be looking at under this topic. All right, so we can begin now. So under the first stage, okay, which is falling under the planning process group, we have defining of activities. So an activity or task is an element of work normally found on the work breakdown structure, also known as WBS, that has an expected duration, a cost, and resource requirement. So we had already discussed what the work breakdown structure is, and I'm sure this is a self-explanatory definition. Okay, so an activity or a task is simply just any element of work that is normally found on the work breakdown structure that has an expected duration, okay, cost, and also resource requirement. All right, so an activity list is then now derived after you have defined your activities that will be needed in your project. So an activity list is a tabulation of activities to be included on a project schedule that includes activity attributes. Okay, so each activity has got its own attributes. So one of the major attributes of activity is known as a milestone. A milestone is a significant event that normally has no duration. So what they're just trying to say in layman's term is a milestone is an event that is achieved along an activity, but it is not restricted or constrained to time. An activity is constrained to time, but not a milestone. So a good example I can give is maybe during a long project implementation, the first milestone can be initiation of a project, because sometimes just getting to initiate a project might mean an achievement of some sort, okay, for you to be able to initiate certain project. So once you are able to finally get to implement the project now, the project is now in process, you can call that as a milestone. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether you start early or you start late, as long as you've just started that project, then you can call it an achievement, and it therefore qualifies to be a milestone. All right, so that way you can be able to see that it's not really constrained to time or duration. Okay, however, the events are constrained to time and duration. All Right. So the second stage is known as the sequencing of activities. So under sequencing of activities, we just get to establish the relationship that is between the given activities in our activity list. So sequencing activities involves reviewing activities and determining dependencies. A dependency or relationship is the sequencing of project activities or tasks. You must determine dependencies in order to use the critical path analysis. So under network analysis, we shall look at what is known as the critical path analysis, and you can only be able to use the critical path analysis once you determine the dependencies among activities. Okay, so below is an example of how you can be able to come up with a critical path analysis, but we shall be able to look at it in details once we come at network analysis. So now, maybe we can also lay just a foundation of network analysis by first understanding what is known as a network diagram. Of course, a network diagram usually comes about once we do sequencing of activities. So a network diagram is a schematic display of the logical relationships among or sequencing of project activities. Okay, so this is just a display of the sequences that have been formed among the activities that will be involved in the project that we want to implement. There are two main formats that are usually used in the displaying of network diagrams. The first one is known as the arrow, and then the second one is known as the precedence diagramming methods. Okay, so the arrow method is known by different names or two distinct names. There's the first one, which is known as the activity on arrow diagram, okay, which is sometimes abbreviated as A or A. So this is arrow method. It falls under the arrow method of network diagram display. Okay. Then the other name can be arrow diagramming method, which can be abbreviated as the ADM. So under this diagramming methods, activities are represented by arrows. Then nodes or circles are the starting and ending points of activities. This method can only show finish to start dependencies. So just to give an example of what we're talking about, this method, as you can see, given on the screen here, we have got an illustration of this diagram showing sequences among given activities. So first of all, the features, there are two main features involved in this diagram. The first one, we have what are known as nodes or circles. Okay, so these circles we are seeing here, these circles here. And then according to the explanation, they said circles are used to show us or to denote the beginning or the ending of a given activity. Okay, so activities are represented by the arrow. The nodes or circles are the starting and ending points of activities. Then activities are represented by arrows, meaning if this show us the ending and starting point of activities, then the activities themselves are represented by, let me just change the color. Okay, they are represented by the arrow. Okay, the yellow color doesn't seem to be showing clearly. Maybe we can use green. All right, so we've got green here. So this activity here is known as activity A, and it has been given a duration of 1, and then it is starting from node 1 and it is ending on node 2. Then we have got another activity that is starting from node 2 and is ending on node 3. Okay, this one here. And then this activity is known as activity D. This activity has been given a duration, which is a duration of 4. Then, as we can see, this activity D cannot start unless activity A has begun and completed, meaning activity D is dependent on activity A starting and completing. That's when it can begin. So this already shows that there is a dependence of activity D on activity A. And then when you look at other activities, maybe let's say activity H here. Okay, so activity H can only start once activity D has completed, which is finishing at 5 here, and then also activity E has completed, okay, which is ending at 5. That's when activity H can begin, meaning there is a dependence of activity H on activity D and activity E. And as we can see, activity D has got a duration of 4, while activity E has got a duration of 5. Meaning, once you count 1 up to 4 and reach here, you still have got another 1 more remaining from activity E before activity H can begin. As you can see, activity H here is starting at 6 because the last one of these activities upon which activity H is depending is ending on 5. Right, so that is on the activity on arrow method, and tomorrow when we meet in our next class, we shall continue and we shall look at the precedence diagramming method.